officially starting yet, but can I just say how amazingly, like, I've been enjoying the cosplay all weekend, but I gotta say, we've got Miss Frizzle here with the most amazing dinosaur puppet, and I'm a librarian, so immediately I was like, very well done, my friend. I just wanted everyone to see this, because it's really absolutely amazing.
Dinosaur puppet. Aww.
Yes, look, it's very
that is so cute.
Right?
Oh, she'll be back shortly.
All right, it's happening, don't worry.
Everything's gonna
We have to be
happen.
zen here, it's very zen, come on, read with me.
I don't think so. I think it's just question and answer and anecdotes and shenanigans. My two favorite things in the world, anecdotes and shenanigans. Hey, at least I didn't say Candlejack. Shenanigans.
I remember you. You have been in all my panels at AUSA for a long time. You were at my 1980s Rewind cartoon panel last year because we had a fabulous conversation about, I forget which cartoon it was.
Lisa's in the quarantine zone.
I am, it's over here. I would like to share, make sure we have the mics out.
She's in like the sexy quarantine zone over there.
I'm gonna get sick this
I
week.
keep putting myself at the back end of taking this off, which looks ridiculous, but actually it's also my only chance to dress like a cat.
It is
So,
pretty cute.
but yeah, I'm just trying to keep myself from affecting the news.
Is this the oh my god we're old?
I'm so sorry, no.
I guess every year of my life I feel older and older and
Oh
older.
God, tell me about it.
So I wanted to thank you guys all for coming out to this. My name is Chris Needham. I'm the Director of Education and Chairman of the Board for Anime USA. And obviously this is our 20th birthday. So we're really excited about. And so, you know, as we started planning, as we started talking about it, first of all, we all started feeling really old talking about 20 plus years of anime, because obviously anime way predates Anime USA and all of the cons. But in doing so, we started talking about how we had a lot of really great guests here from the voice acting side, from working with studios, from studying anime, from doing educational events about anime, doing with a lot of different perspectives about 20 years, about changes, about good things, bad things, where they think anime's going, where they think fandom's going. So we just wanted to give a chance for to ask some questions of them, get their ideas on things, let them tell some stories about what they've seen over the years or some of their thoughts. I'm sure some of these folks you recognize up here, but I wanted to give them each a chance to kind of introduce themselves and maybe talk a little bit about the different roles throughout anime and conventions and fandom that they've had and what they do. So, I don't know if you want to, Charles, if you want to start off.
I don't matter.
Stop that.
Oh, thank you. Oh no, it's if you don't know me, you will. I'm Charles. I've been doing anime. God, I put my 20 years of anime fandom was last year. I've been doing this since '97, when one of my friends handed me a box for Animehem, the anime card game, and it was the Dragon Ball Z expansion. I had no idea what this was, why their hair is standing up, why is that guy green, and what is a spirit bomb? And then I went to my local Coconuts and picked up a fat VHS, put it in my player, discovered what anime was, and then I never slept again for the next 4 years. And since then, I have done my master's degree on con culture. I write a lot. I just put out a book at Otakon called The First Anime, which is about animation in Japan from 1917 to 1963. So if you want to whip something out when your friend talks about, oh man, anime's been great since Astro Boy, you can be like, it's way older than that. And I'm just like a fan who went insane one day, started talking and didn't stop. And because of that, I've met people like Sarah and Lisa and Monica and her love of her life, Ron, are like two of my biggest supporters. I still do stuff because of them. But yeah, that's just my story. I'm not an expert. I just like to talk and read a lot.
I would love to see you and Crispin get in a room and talk about anime and see if
We've done
the
it.
world... Really?
It was at Anime Central 4 years ago.
I would have thought that the world would have imploded.
It didn't. Oh, you know who was also in the room? Helen McCarthy. So yeah, it was a really interesting
I
night.
can't believe I
Oh
missed
my
this.
gosh.
Well, my name is Monica Rial. Hey! Hi! Oh, gosh, thank you. I have been voice acting for 20 years in February for anime, which is crazy. And I've held almost every capacity you can have as somebody who works in the industry. I have been a director. I was an ADR script adapter for a very long time. I even worked in one of the cubicles at ADB back in the day. Way back in the day.
You say Central Park Media, I will beat my head against the wall.
But so yeah, I've been doing this for a hot second, and yeah, still here. Crazy.
Hi. I'm Sarah. I've been a librarian for almost 20 years at this point. I started as an anime fan back in the very early 80s, watching anime with my older cousin. I have been a fan. I have been a convention staffer. I was on staff at Anime Boston for 10 years, between 2006 and 2014, I think I retired, including a few years as head of guest relations. Side note, it's a wonderful job, but oh my God, you learn so much, so ridiculous. Monica was a guest several times and she was lovely. She was one of the easiest people we ever worked with. We loved her. And then, so now I tour around the area and I lecture on educational anime topics of multiple things. And that's mainly what I do as a librarian. I'm the one that when a mother comes in and says, my son wants this anime called The Blue Girl and he's 13, and they go, talk to her, she knows what, believe me. And believe me, that's when I go, ma'am, we need to have a discussion.
Hey, I'm Lisa Ortiz. Like these guys, I've been around. I've done most of. I think I started just a little bit before you started, and we started watching. We were doing stuff. My first anime that I worked on was a show called Record of Lotus War, with a company called Central Park Media at the time. We did a lot of work. They were what was going on in New York at the time. I didn't know that this was a job that you could have. I didn't know that this was a job I would still have over 2 decades later. I have done everything from, I have directed, I've been a producer, I've been a casting director, I have been an ADR adapter, I've also been an engineer on various things, and I've also run show and other different animation, and in addition to like Sonic the Hedgehog, various things that have gone on, I was a cast member on Pokemon in midway through the first season that they had. Another job I didn't know that I would become anywhere near being close to still having years later, when I took over first as a producer that was on it, and then as a director in black and white, and now I'm the director of Sun and Moon. So, I've been around. And I'm bad at math. So I'm assuming this isn't that long.
So, first question is, over the past 20 plus years, what do you guys see as the biggest change in anime?
I'm going to say the biggest change, first of all, is how many people are into it, out and openly. There's still people, and I'm sure you get this a lot, that will talk about stuff that we had done early as sort of gateway anime that got them into things. There's also the people who started watching anime when I started were people who were getting, first of all, they were watching it on VHS. And those VHS were usually taken and recorded from somewhere in Japan. They brought them over, and they were all subs, and sometimes they were like 5th gen tapes, and you couldn't see what was going on. That was the first time that I had seen anime. I used to steal them from my brother. And the demographic of who's been out here coming to cons has changed too, because it was a lot more people who were really, really, really hardcore sub people. And now there's a lot more people who have grown up watching, who, I was talking to someone the other day who said their first anime that they watched was around the Pokemon time, or was on like the Fox, like things that were broadcast then. So there's a lot more stuff that's broadcast. I think it's just a more complex, and there's more people there's just a lot more people watching.
I think the streaming, well, no, streaming pretty much the same thing. I think that the streaming has kind of brought it to the mainstream and brought more people.
I love how anime is totally mainstream, but a lot of the fans don't want to admit it. When I was a kid, it's like, oh man, you like anime? Like it was some kind of secretive little club that you could only do by going to the Sci-Fi Con and finding the guy with the $20 tapes that had like 9 episodes of Dragon Ball.
Back of the room.
Everyone's like, anime isn't mainstream. You can go to Hot Topic and buy it. The moment you're in Hot Topic, you are officially mainstream. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. The people, I remember last year earlier this year, when Michael B. Jordan talked about liking Dragon Ball and the Vegeta outfit for Killmonger, and everyone was like, oh my god, is anime mainstream? And I'm like, anime has been mainstream since 2003. What the hell are you talking about? I could walk into the Virgin Megastore and it wasn't in the basement anymore. But that's something that I've seen. It's not like, oh, let's go down to Chinatown and buy the bootlegs because you can't find them anywhere, because 90% of these shows will never see the light of day. Now it's literally, what am I going to watch on Netflix today?
Yeah.
You're not being pretentious anymore. Everyone has access to it. It's easy to find. It's easy to talk about. It's easy to share. And yet you will always find that one guy who refuses to acknowledge that anime is everywhere now. And then when you point this out to him, he gets offended. That's why I quit Twitter.
I think at least from a kind of educational perspective, one of the things I've really noticed, particularly since about 2003, like you were saying, is the idea that, we used to have either one of two groups that would come in looking for anime. It was either like a really hardcore adult, the guys you'd see at the back of the convention center room, and then really young kids, Pokemon, things like that. And now it's literally like families will come in, and mom and dad, like dad likes Ghost in the Shell, mom likes Slayers because she was a D&D player. One of the kids likes Pokemon, and the other one's like, ooh, Attack on Titan, I love that. It's literally like the whole family will come in looking for stuff. We have these like wonderful geek generations all together it's just way different than when we went back when we were looking at the back of the room at the Star Trek convention, like, I kind of want to buy that guy's anime, but I'm a little scared of it. I don't know. I'm a 15-year-old girl and he's looking at me funny.
To be fair, if you got into anime, when I got into anime, you probably have kids now.
This is true.
I'm 37.
Yes.
By this point, a lot of people in my generation, like the Dragon Ball, Pokemon generation, have kids. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article for Playboy about Pokemon. For Playboy.
Oh, Charles.
Because if you started in 98, in 2015, you were in college.
Right.
You were the right demographic for it. And it's fascinating to see how far it's come, because geek families are now a big deal.
Well, and also the idea that anime, a lot of multiple titles weren't available, but when I was a kid, like, I have clear memories of being in elementary school and running home after school, jumping over my neighbor's fences, because I have to get home to watch Voltron. And I can't miss that opening sequence with Peter Cullen's fantastic narration, like Space Dad, he was fantastic. And we didn't know what that was. I had no idea what anime was until I was in college, and someone's like, wait, I got Ghost in the Shell, check this out. But it was anime. We grew up on Robotech and old episodes of Speed Racer and all of this stuff. We just didn't know that's what it was called. In fact, when I was a kid, it was Japanimation.
Yes.
You guys remember that one? So
My girlfriend watched that in the late 80s.
Unico, I just actually recommended that to a college student when I did my panel for them, and I was like, you will love this because it's the most adorable, wonderful movie about a unicorn that will rip your heart out and stomp on it and then stuff it back in your chest like it's not even a big deal. I think I'm still kind of traumatized by that movie, which I saw on the Disney Channel at 6 years old, by the way. I don't know what they were thinking, but really, I literally like cried so hard my mom thought something had happened to me. It was very, very traumatizing. Excellent movie. Go see them. They're fabulous. It was on the Disney. It was on the original early-run Disney Channel. I might have been 7, but it was like.
They obviously didn't watch it.
Oh, I'm very sure they didn't watch it. They were like, "Oh, it's a cute movie with a little cat and a unicorn." porn and all this, I was like, no, well, what do you mean the gods are terrible and the world isn't fair and everyone dies and leaves you behind? What?
It took me years. It took me years. I was just watching it. And I was like, wait a minute. Little guy's name is Beetle.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it, is like you're saying, is that was what was available. That's what we
Although, if you really want to have fun with it, 1997, 98, Dragon Ball everywhere.
Right.
2018, Dragon Ball everywhere. So I guess things don't change. Yes.
But it takes 2.5 months.
I was going to say, over the years, are there any things like that were really popular and you were everywhere, and either you were very glad to see that's done, or you kind of wish it comes back and you get a second, in terms of anime or in terms of the cons or the fans?
Oh gosh.
I want more Cowboy Bebop. But I'm worried that it's going to turn into the movie. So that's kind of a concern for me. I mean, I live in a world where I can talk about Cowboy Bebop at a con and people don't know what I'm talking about. And that's kind of sad. I live in a world where I can bring up Outlaw Star and no one knows what I'm talking about. But to be fair, you go to Japan to bring up Outlaw Star, they don't know what you're talking about either. True.
I get sad that there are certain cosplays I don't see anymore. Like, I remember when Chobits came out, and there were cheese everywhere. So now whenever I see a chi, I'm like, oh my god, you're chi!
I'm like that with Inuyasha cosplayers. From like 99 to 2004, Inuyasha was the dominant cosplay, and then it disappeared.
There was like this weird window in the mid-2000s where people actually knew what Read or Die was, which is one of my favorite. I used to cosplay Yomiko Readman, and literally while we were waiting to come up here when the earlier panel was going on, a young woman walked by in a Yomiko Readman cosplay. I got a picture. It's the first one I've seen in probably 10 years. And so it's just, again, those titles that... You don't see Tenchi anymore. That was one of the first ones a friend of mine introduced me to.
All that stuff that was big on Toonami in the 90s, early aughts, no one remembers it anymore.
I sort of had a full circle with this recently. I brought it up, just a minute ago. So I loved Voltron as a kid, loved it, and then went back and rewatched it a few years ago to be like, oh, I remember really loving this, and it still has a wonderful nostalgia. It's fun to watch it, but it's not very good. Let's be honest. And I love what Netflix has done with it. The new series that they put out.
So does Japan.
Yeah, they really did an amazing
too.
job of capturing what made that show so fun and exciting, but putting a spin on it that I wasn't expecting.
The guy who created it, they are huge anime fans, and they're like very, very culturally into it. Yeah.
What about the Darkblade? Anybody who watches it on TV?
In fact, if you want to know more about that, after this is over, I'm doing a panel on how sci-fi helped bring anime to America. We're going to talk a lot about Starblade, so I'll come talk.
I have a question for you guys. So with localization over the years, Charles, I know you talked about this in some of your panels. What's it been like working with so many different companies from all over the world? It used to be just, Japan or Korea, now you've got France, Brazil, what's it been like in your different roles?
I just love when I watch something and it's like, hey, did you check out that Castlevania anime? That wasn't anime. What do you mean? It's anime. No, it was German, Canadian, and French, and it was written by Garth Ennis. Really? Yeah, there's nothing anime about it except the character designs, and even those are kind of 90s. Oh, yeah, got 2 words for you. Neo Yokio. Look at that.
Okay, that was terrible, I admit that.
I think it's been interesting to watch it change because now we have Ruby, which is considered the first American anime, which to me still seems so strange because I'm like, why are we calling it that? Why can't it just be its own thing?
Apparently they never heard of Batman Beyond.
But I do think it's fascinating. It's cool because we get to work with so many different outlets now, but what's harder is that you don't just have Japanese translators anymore. You've got multiple translators, and you've got to have people on call, and you've got to know the cultural aspects of dealing with all those different people as well. Because with the Japanese, there's a certain way you greet them. There's a certain way you take the card. There's a certain way you talk to them. Same thing with somebody who's from Brazil or France. It's all a little different, and learning all of those different little technicalities and things can be quite demanding sometimes.
I think it's a really interesting conversation that's happening. for example, and I'm kicking myself for not remembering what director this was, but a few years ago, there was a Japanese anime director from Japan, a Japanese man, who was doing an interview. I don't remember the actual.
Are you talking about Dai Sato and his comment about the Boondocks?
Yes, that's the one.
Dai
Thank
Sato, Japan Society, 2003, called the Boondocks anime.
Right. So when they said, "What's your favorite anime?" he said, "The Boondocks," and they said, "Well, that's not anime." And there was a whole conversation about that, and I just think it's fascinating that that's happening. I know, obviously, I think Charles probably can guess what your opinion on that is, but it is a really fascinating conversation because I think it also talks a little bit about how everything's sort of becoming a globalized thing. You don't really have anime or American movies or anything else that's one group, that's one thing, that's one, you get, yeah, it's a Japanese writer, maybe a Japanese, illustration team, but then the composers from Sweden and the guy that, did the basic translations from Paraguay, whatever. It's a worldwide phenomenon. So it's kind of hard to kind of narrow it down that way.
I just like pointing out that when people say anime is like some kind of like some people you met the people who think that anime is some kind of pure art style uncorrupted by Western influences, and then I must point out that Astro Boy was designed to look like Snow White.
Right.
Because Tezuka was a Disney file, and you realize that globalization's always been the case. The series, some of the series like the one that's on the cover of my book, compare that to like Max Fleischer. They love ripping him off because it's always been global. It's just now that it doesn't take 12 months to get the thing across the Pacific, you see it faster and faster and faster and faster. But you go back to like the dawn of the 20th century, this has been happening.
Well, do you remember the Hobbit movie?
Which
The
one?
Rankin Bass? Oh yeah.
Oh, gosh,
It wasn't that. I mean, I considered anime, that was all Japanese animation.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what your opinion of what is anime. So just sorry, I couldn't help myself. No, it's true.
Oh, no.
Just
I
very,
show
very
one of those
quickly.
ADV clips when I do my American anime panel, and half the room goes, what?
No, it's okay. So I have an excellent friend of mine that I have known since I was 11 years old. We started off as pen pals, writing letters, and now we email. Who has grown up in Osaka her entire life. She's in her 40s, as I am. And she came over to visit with us in the early 2000s, and we, had been, and she comes in and here's my whole anime collection. She was delighted that I had Rurouni Kenshin. She knew the whole theme song. It was wonderful. But we got in this whole conversation. She was very excited to watch some of the anime that I had. And I said, oh, you like anime? So what's your favorite anime, Aya? And she said, oh, my favorite is Beauty and the Beast. And she starts singing the Angela Lansbury Tales all the time and starts dancing in my living room. And I'm like, this blows my mind. I'm like, no, like anime. And she goes, yes, anime, Beauty and the Beast. And I suddenly realized we're having this like cultural conversation where to me, anime is Japanese animation. And to her, anime is just animation. Everything is
It's
anime.
an easier way to say animation in Japanese.
Right.
Anime
So
is
again,
easy to
it's
say.
this really interesting conversation. She was adorable, by the way, great singer.
You're looking at me. So
Oh,
What's he gonna be?
We're talking the mics down here. We want to make sure you chance.
A little bit different vein. You guys have had a ton of different roles in anime companies and cons all over the place. Is there a role you guys have never had before that you think would be fun to try out, or some part of the process that you haven't been involved with that you think could be cool to do?
I've always wanted to be in a licensing meeting. We have we call him Dragon Ball Adam, but Adam Zayner and Gen Fukunaga will go to Japan and meet with the companies and discuss titles and stuff. I've always wanted to, one, be able to speak Japanese, to two, then kind of just sit in on the meeting and hear how it goes down, because, all we can do is hypothesize about how that might happen. For all we know, they're throwing money at each other, or spinning a wheel. This is what you get. This is so I'd love to be able to see how that licensing part goes down.
I've done everything I've wanted to do in the scene. Because I don't want to work in the industry because I think I'd go insane. And I've worn every hat there is to wear at a convention except con chair at this point. So, I'm good. I'm good.
It's a tough question. So much of what I've done I've really loved. I feel like I really found the right niche for my skill set. I guess this is the time that I confess in my early 20s. I went to college to try to be an actor, and so in my early 20s I sort of wanted to be a voice actor. And I still think it's sounds like a fascinating job. Although, funny enough, when I was doing Anime Boston, Greg Ayers, we had a conversation once, and I mentioned that to him, and he was like, "Honey, don't leave your library job. Trust me, you're making more money than I am." You know, it's like, I know, dude. It's not about the money.
Yeah.
But you know, if I ever had the opportunity, I think that would be very interesting because I like to perform. I have a lot of fun with it. But I feel very privileged to be an educator. I've watched kids and people who feel very isolated from each other find each other and find a community through this. I've gotten the chance to educate people about things through it. I mean, it's not anime exactly, but I get to teach American history by talking about the history of comics, or the history of feminism by talking about Wonder Woman and how she was developed, or the history of anime as a mythological storytelling. You know, what else could I ask for? That's amazing. I mean, I'm literally sitting here. I get to go back on work on Monday. Nobody will know who I am, but I get to sit up here with these amazing people having this really amazing conversation. I mean, I got no complaints, dude. What can I say? You know?
I think for me, like I first of all, that's awesome. Second of all, I just want to turn around and just say this because both these guys and you know we work in this shit, but just it is so awesome. Like talking to fans or talking to anybody else, or learning the history of things and realizing that you work on something that can affect people in such a way, and you don't always realize it, but you know culturally you go through. When I first started out, I didn't, even though it was something that I was interested in, and I thought you didn't realize how much of a tool of connection it would be for people of all different kinds, for people who are learning how to interact with each other. You know, it's just an interesting. It's just really, really cool. I am really distracted by the music in the back. My ADD is going absolutely insane. If I start like bouncing, it's okay. We'll stop before we twerk. One of the things that I would love to do though is I would love to be involved. I have worked on prelay and other things before, but always from the voice perspective, like being able to do that, and also being able to put together sound effects for a show and being able to put together music and all things like that. It would be really, really interesting to be able to work with someone who is actually creating the animation, the images, to choose the way that sort of comes together. So to be able to be on that part of the creation process, I would really, really dig.
So over the years, what are some of the big changes you've seen with conventions and your experiences, you know, being guests or meeting fans, and what's changed or what's positive or negative?
I wrote my whole thesis on that. I did my research in that miracle time between 2009 and 2011 when these went from anime cons to fan cons. Let's all have get together and have a party for 3 days. And things started to change. I think today being a fan isn't stigmatized as much as it used to be. I think today we get to bring to the convention what we want, we get out of it what we want. That said, I'm seeing things happen in the convention scene that I am not a huge fan of, but you know what? I'm also an old man. So I'm gonna get that get off my lawn mentality eventually, and I will, when my time is over and I retire, the new people will move in, they'll make the convention what they want. I spent the last 10 years making it what I want, I've had a good run. And that's really what's important. You make the convention what you want it to be. It's not my thing, but you know what? Neither is any Final Fantasy game released since number 10. Does that make them bad? No, they're just not my thing. Although 15 was freaking amazing.
You kind of touched on it earlier, and I think for me the main thing has been watching the dynamic change. Not only the numbers, because I remember going to conventions and 1,000 people was a huge con, you know? It's like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest con ever.
Oh my God, Boston had 4,000 people and it was too big. Really? 4,000 is too big?
And I went to Anime Expo this year and I thought I was gonna barf because there was like so many people. I'm like, I can't even. What? So I mean, that is a huge thing. But not only that, when I first started going to conventions, and I'm sure Lisa can attest, is that as guests, if there was a female guest, there was one of them. And it was usually either Lisa, me, or Jessica Calvello, or Amanda Windley. Like, those are the four that are nothing to go. And so we would never end up at the same conventions together, because they're like, oh, we have to have a girl. All right, well, bring one of the four. So it's kind of neat to see more more females, not only in the audience, but also as guests and stuff, and to see more females on staff. And it's just nice to have a more well-rounded environment, because there were some cons I went to back in the day where it was just a bunch of middle-aged dudes, which was fine. I'll hang out with middle-aged dudes all day long. But it is really cool to see now the families coming. You have whole generations together that all enjoy it together. I think that's awesome.
Well, funny, I was going to touch on something similar. So, you know, I started doing, not so much anime, because there weren't any anime, or weren't many anime conventions, but I started doing cons when I was about 8 years old with my dad. And mostly Star Trek and that sort of thing. And I think anime was really what changed this. So there really was, and this is nothing against the you know, middle-aged white dudes that are in the audience right now. We love you guys. But you would go, and that's pretty much who was there. And some cons were very friendly, but there was this whole thing where if you were a teenage girl or a female or anyone that didn't fit that demographic, there was a lot of, I mean, there still is to some extent, but there was a lot of hostility. There were years that I didn't want to get anywhere near my local con because I had such a negative experience the year before. There were years that I didn't go to a comic book shop for years because I had such a negative experience. And then suddenly, in the late 90s, early 2000s, anime explodes. And one of the things we noticed in the library field was that almost exclusively, everybody coming in and asking for manga, there were some guys, but it was almost exclusively women. The guys would come in and ask for superhero comics, which I love too, but women and girls were coming in and saying, do you have Sailor Moon? Do you have this? Do you have this? And suddenly I'd go to these anime cons and it was like a great mix of everybody. And then I think very slowly other conventions, sci-fi and comics and all these other things started to follow suit because I think they realized, holy God, we can make money. Girls want this stuff. Like, let's start selling to them. I remember Sailor Moon coming out, and that phenomenon was just like, there's a show, there are dolls, there's all this other stuff that like, yeah, we can sell to women. We can sell to people who are people of color. We can sell to all of these non-traditional geeks, quote unquote, which obviously we know, we've all been here forever, and there wasn't any difference, it's just they weren't seeing us. And I really think anime was what changed that, or at least started to change it. There's obviously some of that going on, but in a large way, it is like apples and oranges. This is nothing like what I was experiencing at 15. Thank God, you know, because, you know, now we're all connected. We have all these wonderful connections.
Anime is the open fandom. I've been saying that for years. I don't go to sci-fi cons because my last 3 experiences at sci-fi cons were a bunch of even older men demanding I justify my presence there and why they should talk to me. You go to anime and it's not justify why you belong at the con. It's, oh, you like anime? Oh, you don't? Come to my room, we'll watch a bunch of stuff. Have you heard of My Hero Academia? I love that because anime was the open fandom. And that, a lot of times when I talk to some of the older order fans from like Rob Fennell and Walter Amos, he'll always tell me things like, anime fans were treated with such disdain by the sci-fi community that when they got their own convention, they swore to never do that. And for the most part, you don't see that. Do you see it online? Yes, but the internet is a turbulent cesspool of crap these days. At least in person, convention is open.
What was the internet ever not?
When it first existed and people realized they could play Dungeons and Dragons over a telephone line. But that's the thing, anime was the open fandom. It was always the one where we want you here, we're glad you're here, thanks for coming, here's some cat ears. They go to sci-fi con and they be a bunch of crotchety old men. And I'm really glad that has not destroyed my fandom yet.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I first got into technically back in 2003 with my now husband. My first con was at 2003.
Cat Snow Con?
Yeah. My God. No. But at the time, I did not realize that Unico had been anime. I remember watching it in my cousin's house. But, you know, you get stigmatized for like anime. I'm like, do I stigmatize you for liking Seinfeld?
I went to anime, what is it?
I don't know about you, but I did.
I went to Icon in 2003 and wanted to punch everyone in the room. I went to Anime Next in 2003 and said, okay, I'm home now. Then I got plopped down a flight of stairs. Regrets.
I will say it's been interesting recently because I've started doing a lot more comic conventions. Because what's happened is, even though they were very reluctant to bring in the anime fandom, but then when they would bring, like, say, a Chris Sabat or a Sean Schemmel, and they realized, holy crap, there's more people in that man's line than William Shatner's. What is happening? And so now they're starting to realize, oh, people like them. Let's bring more. So it's been really interesting watching all of these kind of curmudgeon-y dudes be like, all right, fine, let the anime in.
Last year at Wizard World, I had 30 people in a room, and I'm like, man, there were only 30 people in the room. The official response from Wizard World was, holy crap, you had 30 people in the room. Congratulations.
I think the biggest difference that I've seen is that the anime market went from DVD, from VHS and DVD where you collected everything, and now it's streaming. And I have all these useless DVDs and VHSs that I can just turn on the TV.
The collector's item.
Yeah, they're collector's items.
And 10 years ago, it was only available to those who knew where to find it. Arrow Video, Hollywood Video, sometimes you saw it on Showtime. Now with the advanced technology, you can watch anime damn near everywhere, including online.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about before.
And every property. And that's the true thing.
Yeah, but I mean, streaming just changed everything for everybody all across the board. But that's, we'll talk about that later. But my thing with the changing of the markets that you were talking about, that I took a break from conventions from when we went in. There was a period, it was sort of in the early 2000s, and then I took a break for a couple of years. Because I was sort of burnt out going through there. I was doing a lot of stuff in New York, and then I came back, and what I came back to was it was the same thing, but it was a totally different place. Like it was when we first started, like, and Monica, you mentioned this before, people they didn't have the access to this, not many people saw it. Sometimes they were more interested, like I said, in the subs, and they were with dubs. We were sort of like breaking through of getting people in there, and now it is interesting seeing sort of like more families, more girls, more all of that as part of it. But I think and I think as streaming and things like that, it just changes it. It just means that something that you put out, rather than being just the people who can buy a DVD, people who can spend this much money, you know, you would have to save up for those editions, rather than being like $60 or $40 or even $20, you can spend like $10 or $15 or whatever and get a subscription and see a whole bunch of things and just have all this access. And I think it made it accessible also to people not just people who were collectors, not just people who were there, but people anybody who could, it's so much more affordable to people, which makes it easier to reach people.
It's much less of a risk. You know, back when I was dating my husband, you know, we joked about this up in the green room. So our Friday night was you go to Blockbuster, and the back anime wall was like a couple of Miyazaki films, 2 or 3 hentai, and like some random, you know, VHS or 2 that like you had no idea what it was. Could be anything. Could be the greatest thing you've ever seen. Could be complete schlock. Usually it was somewhere in between those 2 extremes. And then you took your chance. You picked what you wanted. We knew we didn't want the hentai. I've already seen all the Miyazaki films, so we picked something at the end and see what was there. And we did see some great stuff, but a lot of the time it was like, oh god, Twilight of the Dark Master's worst choice. You know, it just, you didn't know. So you either found a place to rent, you took the chance on buying it if it was something you'd never seen because a couple people maybe recommended it to you, or you waited till it was something on television where you were like, I've seen Sailor Moon, I love it, I want to buy these VHS tapes. And now it's like, I can literally go through Netflix and be like, never heard of that one, click, let's see how it is, let's go. And it's the same $7.95 I pay every month anyway. So.
Can I just vent for a second, because you guys will get this. So, you guys may not have heard, or maybe you have, that Crunchyroll and Funimation, you know, they had a partnership and that's separated. So of course the fandom is like, oh my god, the world is ending, it's all over, we're all gonna die, there's no more anime left. And so I put out a tweet trying to calm people down, saying, you guys, everything's gonna be fine, it's all good, everybody chill out. And I made I made an example by saying, hey, look, you know, I know $5.95 it's not that expensive, like it's less than a fast food meal. And then people started to jump on me. How dare you tell people that $5.95 isn't expensive? And then I had to go back and explain, like, okay, child. 20 years ago, you got a VHS tape that cost you $65 that had 4 episodes on it.
Or one episode.
Like 2, right?
Or 1 episode,
It's
yeah.
not more expensive than Jones.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing is that like when I try to explain to them that $5.95 is nothing, like there used to be bumper stickers that said anime, crack is cheaper. Now I don't know the going rate for crack these days, but I would assume.
It's more than $6.95.
Thank you.
And then, you know, on top of all of that, you get your, whatever your VHS tape was, with your 2 to 4 episodes, one if you're really unlucky, and you're like, oh, this is amazing, I love this show. I can't wait to see the next one. 6 years later, yes, I got the next season, woohoo! You know, it's like, and again, it's obviously, people don't know that because you're not experiencing it. I get that, but there are days where, like, I'm pretty patient, and there's days where I'm just like, son, you have no idea the horrors that I've seen. I've seen the glitter bombs over, you know, like it's like, there's just no way to explain it. For someone that didn't experience all that to now be like, I get to see everything. I click a button and bam, the entire series is there. I binge it in 24 episodes. It's fabulous. Right, it's just like...
I saw every other episode of Armitage the Third because of that. It was one episode per VHS. Never had sequential VHSs in the store. I watched 1, 4, 3, and that was it. I don't know what the hell happened. I watched it out of order. I don't know what the hell was going on, but I loved it anyway.
That's kind of how anime conventions came about, actually, because a lot of the time, the only way you could do this and afford it was you joined an anime club. Either your college, your high school, or just a group of people, you know, that you were lucky enough to live in a place that a lot of people were hanging out at the local Asian market. And so I might buy the first $60 tape, and Charles might buy the second one, because I can't afford that right on top, you know. So then you'd share the tapes, you'd pass tapes around. Or you knew somebody, I mean, I'm gonna date myself so badly. My very first anime that I, again, didn't know it was anime at the time, but this is even before Voltron, was my uncle was a medic in the military. And he was stationed on a Korean-American base. And he had a buddy in Japan on a base there. And the buddy in Japan, swear to God, remember it's clear as a day, did a Betamax copy of 2 episodes of Macross off of Japanese TV with no translation or subtitles, just Japanese. They sent it to my uncle in Korea. He hands it to his buddy who speaks Japanese, who literally gets on a typewriter and types the script out in English for us, packs it in a box, ships it to my cousin. We have to rent a Betamax player, and my cousin, my very first anime was my cousin playing pause. Okay, here's what they just said, and reading the page of the script. Okay, next scene, bam, and doing like, and I still don't, and I was like 6, I don't remember exactly what's going on. You know, and I tell that story just to be like, we're not trying to be grumpy up here, guys, but oh my God, we have it so good now. So good, even if you can't afford both Crunchyroll and, you know, Funimation or whatever, pick one, go with it, have fun. Maybe you don't get to see all the shows you like, but good God, it's better than a Betamax tape with my cousin doing the worst voice acting job I've ever heard in my life.
I don't know, that sounds pretty awesome, actually.
I tease Richie about it all the time. It's a fabulous memory of him. He's also the guy that got me to D&D, so I get him a lot of credit right there.
I love that we can still tell stories like this. I mean, 20 years from now, what are the stories going to be?
Charles, you just stole my last question.
I'm sorry, I talk about waking up, because I like Dragon Ball, I didn't have cable. My parents did not believe in cable television, so I did not have Tsunami. I would watch Dragon Ball Z on syndication. So I would get up at 6:30 in the morning, and if you know me, that's usually when I go to sleep, to watch Dragon Ball Z on Channel 11 in New York. And then one day I woke up at 5:30, and I went downstairs at 6, and I put on Channel 11, and I see this blonde girl in a sailor suit. What is this? I like this. So I would get up and I would watch Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, and then I discovered at 7, you could switch to Telemundo and watch Dragon Ball Seto. And I watched Dragon Ball in Spanish for 2 straight years, and that is how I passed my Spanish regents. Because that's what I had access to.
I can actually beat you on that one. The
They're just
first,
like, who's gonna have a story like that?
I know, it's
in
true.
like 20 years.
The very first time I saw Kimba the White Lion, which was actually Leo the Lion, I think was the English translation, was on Telemundo in Spanish with English subtitles. It was totally bizarre. Fantastic stuff though.
I wonder if you'll just be able to like import your anime library into your brain and just be able to watch it as you're walking down the street.
That's what
It's in your brain while you're sleeping.
That's what I think it'll be like VR anime. Like you'll go in and you're like pick your character, you'll see them from that perspective, and then you can walk around and the whole thing, and hopefully you can just sit about. Yay!
And they'll be like, remember the days we had to stream?
Look at that, we had to look at it with our eyeballs.
We've had a couple of anime about why that's a bad idea. Don't people get caught in those and they can't wake up or something? I've seen
So,
Or then you just have psychopaths. No, this is one of the things I love about, like, when I got into fandom, it's like, I could share these shenanigans stories with people. And then this brings up this one thing that always hits me. People have said to me, you know, you can get anime wherever you want. Why do you go to conventions? And then it all comes down to this one thing. I can watch whatever anime I want, whenever I want. So of course I watch no anime. It's easy to get, so I don't care anymore. But here's the thing. I go to conventions because we can tell these stories to each other. That's the one thing that you don't get. Years ago when I published my thesis, I was on a podcast with Daryl Surratt and Ed Sizemore. It was from Manga Out Loud. And it's like, you go to a convention, and why would you go to a convention and buy a badge when you don't need to do this, and I always said the same thing. There is an energy involved in participating in your fandom that cannot be replicated unless I am in the room with you. And that's kind of the thing. Anime has managed to weather that storm phenomenally. And we go to conventions because we want to be with our people. There are people that like Matt and Jen over there. I only see them at conventions. And I come to the shows to see the community and interact with the community. Can I just watch anime at home? Yes. But I can't get that kind of interaction sitting at home. And that's kind of the one thing I love about it. I'm going to still say in 20 years, we'll still be doing cons because nothing quite can replace that. I just stayed up till 4 in the morning knocking back a 6-pack of beer and playing Mario Kart. I could do that at home, but then I'm pathetic. I do that with my friends, and it's Thursday night shenanigans.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed. You know, because it used to be, I looked over to go to conventions to buy stuff that they sold here. But now you can get it all offline. I don't hardly ever go there.
Well,
Artist
I
Alley
was
is
just
for
going to say
friends.
this, so go to Artist Alley.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't do the dealer room so much, although I do occasionally when I'm getting prizes for my kids at the library, but I actually buy way more of my prizes in the dealer's room these days, because I'm like, or the dealer's room, the Artist Alley, because I love the crafters and I want for myself, yes, but I run a little free 2-day anime convention at my library. I work in a city that has a very large underserved population, so a lot of these kids cannot scrape up the money to go to Anime Boston or come down here to Washington or whatever. So we try to make it as much like a real convention as possible. So I will get things that I have the guests autograph and I give them to the kids, or I get interesting things for them. And I find so much amazing stuff on Artist Alley that I've had kids that come back 2 years later that go, oh my God, Miss Sarah, do you remember those earrings I won at ChibiCon a couple years ago? Oh my God, so I wore them on my first date. It's like, oh, you guys went to see a Miyazaki film. That's what it is you go and find these really interesting things that people are making. And if you don't want to go to you can go find, get the rest of it on, Amazon or wherever it is that you do your
I
shopping.
was like, soundtracks.
There's nothing wrong with getting that stuff online.
Posters.
But like I said, like Charles was saying, really, like the buying stuff is fun, but that's really, we could all buy stuff elsewhere. That's not fun,
Creating the community.
Well, or also see if you can get a good deal. Maybe on Sunday when they're all packing up and they're like, I don't want to take all this crap home. They mark it down half price. Amazon's like, we're shipping it to your house, buddy. Pay through the nose, whatever. Go check them out. A lot of dealers will cut you a deal on Sunday when they want to bring everything back. This gentleman's been really good. He's had his hand up forever.
So, in regards to how cons has changed over time, one thing that I do remember is back in the day, a lot of cons weren't so much community focused panel-wise. It was more of a place where industry could just set up panels to advertise products.
Yeah.
While now you rarely see as many industry panels, and it's more community-based, fandom-focused panels.
There is a difference between a trade show and a fan conference. I remember a lot of the old anime cons, not like your Otakon or your Anime Expo, were often started by either college students or by people who copied the academic conference idea and decided to just make it. Well, what is the snake, Chris? What's the slogan for Anime USA? Exactly.
Right.
And you still see those industry things. You go to Anime North, although Anime North everyone should go to that con if you haven't been there at least once, because it's Canadian. But Otakon, Anime Expo, like Anime Central, those ones still have a strong trade show vibe because they're big, they've always been there. Then you've got your community con that was started by fans who are doing this for the love of fandom, and you will see a marked divide. I see a marked divide whenever I do a con like Wizard World versus a con like this.
Oh, yeah.
I go to Wizard World, I plunk down my table, I talk, I go out to dinner, I go to my room, I go to sleep. I come here, I don't sleep for 3 days, I drink too much alcohol, I spend way too much money, I don't eat anything, I hang out with my friends, and then I sleep for 4 days afterwards. Because I am at a fan con with my friends. And that's the thing, the trade shows are still there. They just get eclipsed by the fact that everyone else made their fan shows. And those fan shows are usually the ones that we always end up talking about. Because someone got glomped down a flight of stairs, or because there was some guy in the elevator dressed up like Steven Tyler singing Love in an Elevator for 7 straight hours. Why did he do that? I don't care.
And it's not even a size thing, because again, having worked for Anime Boston, especially for a New England con, is freaking huge. Like, we have a lot of people up there, but every single person that works, we're all volunteers. I've retired, but it's hard to drop it. You love it so much. Every person that works that show volunteers, whether it's the chairman all the way down to, the guys that are running around volunteering and picking up trash, in between panels. Everyone volunteers. Nobody gets a paycheck for that. And as having been head of guest relations for 4 or 5 years, that's literally a second job that I did without pay. I mean, I was doing 40 hours a week for Anime Boston on top of 37 and a half at my... I actually did more hours a week for Anime Boston than I did my actual paying job. And it was fascinating and fun, and we loved doing it. So it's not always a size thing either. It really is whoever's behind the scenes. You have to kind of look into that. And of course, the part of it too is the bigger the show, even if they're fan run, the bigger the show, the more you kind of have to start streaming some of that stuff, because I don't know what the exact count this year is, but we got close to 30,000 at least the last 2 years I was there. And without some of that trade show vibe and some of what trade show does, it's a mess. Like, you're gonna have people, getting hurt, you're gonna have people doing ridiculous things. Let's be honest, we all get excited. How many here were the teenager that ran up and down the elevator screaming Marco Polo occasionally? I'll admit it, we've all done it, But now, okay, so fine, yeah, but now we know, okay, probably not the best thing to do. So some of that trade show vibe almost has to happen once it's past a certain point. But that's mostly because people really want to run a good show and have a good show for you.
Otherwise, we're at debauchery con.
Right, absolutely. Which, that could be fun too, but go into knowing
I've been to a
it's
few,
debauchery
they're
con,
very
right?
interesting.
I mean, if you're a parent, you're taking your two, 13-year-old and 15-year-old kids to a con, like AB or one of those, you want to know those kids are going to be safe in the building. You want to know that it's okay if they want to run into the dealer's room while you're having a bite with your husband, over on the side or whatever. So there's responsibilities that you have to have, and even a small con you have to have that, but it's much more glaringly huge when it's, 30,000 people through the door.
I'm just going to say this, it's an unpopular opinion, but the year that Anime Boston got rid of their Saturday night dance, the con got 1,000 times better.
Well, so I was still on staff when that happened, very briefly, because it's a totally different thing. But one of the hardest things about that, and I just want to say this because we're talking about industry cons, was that people were pissed, and I get it. I do. I'm not a fan of the dance myself, but I get why people loved it. but they treated the con and they treated the staff like we sat back and went, ha 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 ha, how can we screw with our feds? And really what it was we all ended up with the Boston Police Department, with the mayor's office, with the hotel, with all of these people that were like, we are shutting your con down. You are no longer going to do this con. And a lot of people that were in charge of that sat down and made deals left and right and did everything in their power, blood, sweat, and tears, extra 15 hours a week on top of the 40 we were already doing to make sure that con didn't disappear. And we ended up saying, fine, we'd rather have an entire con for 3 days and get rid of the dance than be like, that was our choice, no con or no dance. But the problem is, and please keep this in mind when you're dealing with conventions, is we can't publicly come out and say that. I can now because it's years later and it's over. But at the time it was like, you don't release this. We couldn't talk about it. So we couldn't go on the message boards and go, guys, we're doing the best we can, but the police department is really not budging on this, because that would have been a whole legal ball of wax we didn't want to touch. And I'm not saying cons don't screw up. Obviously cons do some things that are unscrupulous sometimes, or not great. But sometimes when it seems like a con is being kind of like, you know, they're not telling us everything or they're being really vague, sometimes it's not because they're trying to screw with you or that they don't care about their attendees. It's literally because they can't talk about it legally or in the process of trying to solve the problem. So try to be just a little, I'm not gonna, it's a huge story, we'll take
Can of worms.
Yeah, not going. But just try to be a little bit patient with your cons, because a lot of these, I mean, these guys at Anime USA, you know, this blood, sweat, and tears because they love you guys. They want you to come every year. They want you to have a good show. You know, I want you to have a good show. I mean, everyone here wants us to have a good show. You know, so just be a little patient, be a little kind. When they screw up, call them, but also be patient and kind at the same time. We should be doing that for everyone anyway, right? A little more patience and a little more kindness in the world would go a long way. Sorry, I kind of went a little off topic.
We are out of time, but thank you guys for coming, and thank you our wonderful panelists for sharing our non-crotchety walk down memory lane. So thank you guys very much, and definitely check out all the other panels and signings and everything else everyone up here has this weekend.
Bye, guys. Thanks, guys.